In this lesson, we're going to essentially split our asteroid, having them launch away from each other in opposite directions, adding a bit of a chaotic, high-stakes arcade pressure that our players will love. All right, let's begin by opening up our BP asteroid. And then what we're looking to do is to jump straight back into the custom explode function located in our functions section under my blueprints. Go ahead and double click explode to make sure that opens, which we have here. In one of our last lessons, we used a for loop running from 1 to 2 prints and essentially creating 2 small shards. Now, loops are great for doing identical tasks, but because loops run the exact same code twice, it's hard to tell whether shard 1 will be flying right and shard 2 will be flying left. So to give us absolute control over their opposite trajectories, what we're going to do is delete our for loop and explicitly lay out 2 separate spawn actor machines side by side. So go ahead and select your for loop here, and then press your delete key or delete. All right, let's zoom out a little bit here and notice that we now have a disconnection between our branch true pin here and our spawn actor asteroid execution pin here. All right, so what we want to do next is select our spawn actor node, and I'm going to move it a little bit down here. I'm going to move my cursor up here and hit Control D. And what we're essentially doing here is now we have 2 identical, what I like to call 3D printers or spawners on our screen. One is going to be used to spawn shard A, and the other is going to be used to spawn shard B. So this is going to represent shard A, so I'm going to connect my true pin into the top here, this execution P here. Then I'm going to move this guy over here. What I want to do is I want to connect the output arrow from spawn shard A directly into spawn shard B. Next, once these are spawned, I'd like to destroy them. We might have to add a delay later, but for now, let's go ahead and select our destroy actor here. And then off on the side here, hit Control D to duplicate it. And then we're going to wire that directly inside of here. And let's go ahead and save that and compile it. Now, before we can sort of push our shards out, essentially our BP asteroid, we need an engine component to handle the speed in which it'll move, just sort of like what we did with our laser. So go over to your components panel on the left-hand side and click the add button. And I just want you to type projectile. And what we're looking for is projectile movement. Then we want to select this new component and head over to the details panel on the right-hand side. Now, go ahead and locate a few things. We were looking for initial speed here. We're also looking for gravity, and then we're looking for max speed. We can also type at the top gravity here. And you can see that my projectile gravity scale is set to 1. I want to set that to 0. I don't want it to fall. I just want them to move. Let's close that out. And under projectile here, you can either locate initial speed, or you could, essentially type it out at the top like before. Now we want to set initial speed and max speed both to 300. All right, let's compile and save this blueprint. Now what we want to do is calculate the opposite launch vectors. This is sort of the magic math trick. So we want shard A to launch out of the right side of our exploding parent, and we want shard B to launch out of the left side. So what I'm going to do is just kind of find an empty space over here, and I'm going to right click and select get actor, and what we're looking for is right vector. All right, so from this, we want to drag a wire out and just type in MUL for multiply. Now, what we're looking for is to multiply the x, y, and z values by one floating point number. So I'm going to right click on our little dot here, and I'm going to go to to float single precision. And then I want to set the bottom pin here to 1, to a positive 1. Now let's look at our first spawn actor here. And out of the return value here, we want to grab a reference to this projectile movement component. So let's go ahead and drag that out and just start typing projectile. And you'll see here there's some default values here. There's get projectile movement. So now we're getting a reference to this projectile movement component here. And then what we want to do is set the velocity of this. So go ahead and drag this out. And I turn off context sensitivity for this and type set velocity. And what we're looking for essentially is where it says movement component here, that's this projectile movement, we want to set this velocity here. Now what we want to do is we want to essentially connect the white execution pin so that the set velocity node sits right between shard A and shard B. So what we're going to do is grab our execution pin here, plug it in here, and our execution pin and plug it in there. Now as for our velocity, what I want to do is plug in our pin from our multiply node here directly into the velocity here. All right, so for shard B, which is right here, we essentially want to do the exact same thing, but we want to use our negative inversion trick to flip the direction. So you can either select or create another get actor node and multiply node. So I'm just going to select both of these. Remember, we want to set this to -1. And then the same thing here, we have a velocity node here. So I'm going to select that. So we want a second velocity node. So I'm just going to hit move down here a little bit, move this out a little bit, and I'm going to hit Control D down here. Oops, let's make sure I've got all those selected again. There we go. And then this value is going to be a -1. And let's actually place all of this right here. And what we're going to do is wire this in between here and here. And similarly, we want to grab the projectile node from here. We want to get our projectile movement. And we want to make sure that we wire that into velocity. So that our second node looks like this. All right, so we're essentially in the home stretch now, and our execution timeline is nearly perfect. The only thing that we have to work on now is a little bit of cleanup, so I'm going to kind of shift all of this over, as well as we want to make sure our shards inherit their parents' location coordinates, and then the shrunken float scale, which we've set up here. So I'm going to move this guy over this way. So we want to first by locating our yellow get actor location node, and we want to make sure that the return value for this is plugged into both spawn transform location. So let's kind of move this down here so this is a little clearer. And it looks like that's set up properly. And then I want you to locate the green divide node here where we essentially cut our current size in half. And I want to make sure that the green output wire and I want to make sure that it's plugged into the green size on both of these. You can see it's still on this one. So let's go ahead and connect that here. And then finally, we want to make sure that we drag out the same green math wire into, or feed it into rather, the spawn transform for the X, Y, and Z. Again, if you need an example, just look at this one. Let's make sure to compile and save this. All right, and there's two things that I'm sort of suspecting as well, and that's that this value here of 1 might be too low for setting our asteroids to move. So that's 300 for this. I'm going to try that value, and then minus 300 for this one. And that should send our shard to the left, moving pretty quickly, and this one to the right. Another thing I'm thinking of is in our details panel. Let's go back to our, let's see. Let's bring this over. And another thing is, I believe we set, let's see, in our projectile movement, our initial speed to 300. If we leave this as is, what's going to happen is our asteroids are going to move at a rate of 300 when our game starts. See how they're moving forward? And we don't want that. It makes it look like our ship is moving. It's also kind of gives me a little bit of a, I don't know. So let's just set this to 0. Queasiness, I guess. I don't know when I'm playing the game. So when I press play now, you could see that it's set. And if I hit the space bar here, that one's too small. This big guy should send 2 shards moving. And maybe I'm wrong. Let's see. There we go. That one did it. Because we have to tweak those values. Some of them are a little bit too big or too. So we get these shards moving in different directions. See that? So yeah, we're getting there. And as we progress, we need to build out maybe a scoring system would be kind of cool at this point as we begin to wrap up the game. And we need to figure out, you know, um, a bunch of different mechanics that make this feel more like asteroids. But anyway, I hope you're enjoying this tutorial, and I look forward to what you guys come up with in your project so far.